first of the first annual, I guess, right? Men's prayer breakfast in English. So I'm Dr. Vinny, pastor of the English ministries at Fado Church. I want to welcome you all today. And before we begin, I want to make sure you guys. I think we had some chance to greet each other, but just kind of go ahead and greet each other. Tell somebody your name, just to get to know everyone here. We're a nice small group, and that was it, huh? Pause here for 10 minutes. Oh, no, okay, we're good. Quick housekeeping. There's plenty. You can always, there's food, there's coffee, there's juice. You can, you know where the restrooms are at. So if you want to bring your stuff in here too, you can. You know, if you want to drink your coffee here, help yourself. At any time you want to take a break, go for it. You know, again, the things will be out there. The pastries are amazing. I don't know where you got them from. Those are really good. So if you haven't filled out a raffle ticket, please do. We're going to raffle off those things that are out there. If you want to look at, see what we have that for our designs, for our shirts, for our hoodies and hats, there's a QR code. And you can look at our products, our merchandise, our Fado merchandise. All right, so let us get started. Let us open with prayer. Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to come today to be amongst other men. We ask that your Holy Spirit come upon us, Lord, and that you may just open our hearts, Lord. We pray for our speakers today, Lord, that you may fill them with your Holy Spirit. We thank you for just being such a good God, Lord. We do pray for all the men out there, Lord, that are seeking you, and those that just are wanting to know you, Lord, and those that maybe are just kind of searching. We ask that you may speak to their hearts, Lord. And we thank you for those who are not even able to be here, but maybe they're online or they're just on our hearts, Lord. We pray for them as well. We thank you, Lord, in your precious name. Amen. So let us get started. So our theme today is Stand Strong. The Bible shows us how to stand strong. And three men who lived in this very different and difficult circumstances are going to kind of be shared with you today. And they're going to be about courage, wisdom, and integrity. So this morning, you're going to hear a heartfelt and powerful message from some really good men. Marco will be sharing today about courage, as David demonstrated in 1 Samuel. I'm going to be sharing with you about wisdom, as demonstrated by Solomon in 1 Kings, and Ryan will be sharing with you about integrity, as discussed in Daniel chapter 6. So we look forward to gathering also in discussion, kind of just talking about what the Lord spoke to us, what he put on our hearts. It's always good. It's interesting because men don't usually get this opportunity. And I know sometimes we'll, be in sports or things like that, but just to really be vulnerable, really speak into each other's hearts, it's really difficult. So I think what a great opportunity that we can do this today. So be open, be ready to share, and I hope this really kind of speaks to your heart. So let us pray for our first speaker, who is Marco. And Marco, I tell you, Marco, every time he encounters me, man, this guy's got a heart for God. I love you, dude. And just I know, and it's really interesting. Even this morning, Marco says, I'm nervous, I'm anxious, and he goes, but I need to be, you know. And it's so cool because he said, this is I'm going to be talking about the Lord, and he goes, so I need to be anxious. I'm like, wow, maybe I need to be anxious more. But thank you, brother, and I want to welcome you. And again, Marco is come on up here, Marco. Marco is he's married. He's had a calling to always share the Lord's word with others, especially as he shares his story and his journey. Pray for open hearts that we may hear
Praise God. To God be the glory. So, this morning, I'm going to be sharing a little bit of my testimony and how my testimony I can relate to the journey of David and him killing Goliath. And how I can relate as far as in me killing my Goliath in my life. You know, after fully surrendering and coming to the Lord 100%. So um, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Marco Magaña, Marco Antonio Magaña. I was born in Orange County, raised in Santa Ana, grew up Catholic, baptized Catholic. I'm the youngest of three brothers and one sister. So for the most of my life, I was raised in Santa Ana, and then I jumped around a little bit. I lived in Aliso Viejo, Escondido, Oceanside. I grew up in not the best. I grew up in the projects. Those of you who know. I grew up in the projects. I grew up with drugs. I grew up with gangs. Um, I just grew up into all that lifestyle, which was, you know, it was. I know that it was the journey that God had called me. God had called me to be. Even as I guess I could say as difficult as that may be, sound, but everybody has their journey and their yeah, their life that they're gonna go through, their journey, right? Um, so I was, to just to speak a little bit about my testimony, I was 9 years old. I was 9 years old when I started smoking weed. I was 11 years old when I started smoking crystal meth. I was 14 when I started snorting heroin. Between 15 years old, I started, wanting interested into gangs and all that. My brothers were they were gangbangers as well. They were in and out of the prison system. And that's everything that was around me. Drugs, gangs. Just a lot of partying. You know what I mean? A lot of that destruction life, you can say. And you know, so I kept on living my life, kept on doing what I was doing. I didn't know better. You know what I mean? Obviously, I didn't know better. Um, I was about, as you could say, maybe 13 years old, 14 years old when I had one of my cousins on my dad's side. We were best friends. So we're practically just I guess you could say in a worldly term, we were road dogs. You know what I mean? So we were pretty much always together. And you know, um, there was this one time that to back up a little bit, my dad's brother-in-law, he was a pastor for, well, he still is a pastor for Vista California Prince of Peace Church. And uh, there was this one time that his mom, came up to us and asked us if we wanted to receive Christ. So I did it just for the moment, for the excitement, because my cousin was doing it. So I said, why not? Let's do it. Let's give our life to Christ. But I continued living my life. I continued doing what I was doing. Not thinking of not thinking of what it was. Maybe I didn't do it wholeheartedly. Maybe I just did it to do it. But um, so fast forward. Kept on living my life. Kept on getting into trouble. Kept on getting incarcerated. Using drugs. Um, Fast forward to 19 years old when I finally got to like one of my, I can say, the biggest, toughest, most life addiction moment of my life, which was I was slamming heroin. I was injecting heroin for about close to 2 years. And I found myself this one morning in my uncle's church, because I was homeless. I was homeless for a bit, and my uncle opened up the doors to his church. I used to stay in one of the rooms where they used to do Sunday school. You know what I mean? So that's where he let me stay there for a little bit. And you know, and one of those days, my dad seen me that I was a wreck. He seen me that I was on drugs. That was a day that earlier that morning because I overshot a little bit of heroin. Thank God it wasn't enough to take me to the hospital, because me and my older brother were getting high. It was always my brothers. We were getting high together for the majority of the time. You know what I mean? We were really close. We were really close. We grew up that way. Excuse me. And that day when we went into church, to listen to the preaching that my uncle was, it was a service, so he's like, why don't you go up there so they can pray for you, and and just something in my heart, tugged me. It tugged me really hard, and I can finally say that I had finally reached a moment where I had said, you know what, I'm done. I'm tired. I had already lived my life, you know, just in a destructive way as far as drugs and all sorts of things. You know what I mean? Just living in a destructive way of living. It my dad told me, why don't you go up there so they can pray for you? And I said, you know what? I thought about it. Regardless of I was very loaded that day. And I went up there. I went up there. The only thing I said to the Lord was, if you say who you say you are, then help me stop because I don't know how to stop. I prayed, and a week later, I got arrested. On top of the fact that I had already I had gone to juvenile hall. I had already done a year in county jail. Thank God I never went to prison. Even though that's one of the things, believe it or not, that's one of the things that I wanted to do as I was influenced by life, by people walking in darkness, walking in gangs, walking in this way of living. I was influenced by that. That influence powered my life. You know what I mean? But you know, anyways, so I prayed that prayer, and God answered that prayer. I can honestly say that that was my first actual encounter with the Lord. That I really had that encounter, and as soon as I got locked up, God started putting people in my life already. God started putting people in my life, and it's just amazing. From almost using 2 years of heroin, I went through like one day of withdrawal. And it was like a supernatural healing because I kid you not, it was like usually you go through bone aches, you go through this, you go through that, and whatnot. And I just went through one day of stomach issues and gone. So I know that that was the Lord. You know what I mean? I know that that was God's power. And so I was faithfully walking with the Lord for about 2 years. And this is where I'm gonna throw in the mix how I relate to finally coming to terms with those giants in my life, right? Um, like David did, and having the courage to stand in the power of God, to stand in the calling, to stand in that anointing, because we're all anointed. When we come to the Lord, when we're sealed, when we come to God, when we accept Christ as our Lord and Savior, we're sealed by the Holy Spirit. We God gives us a calling. God places a calling in our life. God anoints us, for whatever mission, whatever calling He has for our lives. So, um, you know, as I did, I knew God had called me for great things. You know what I mean? I know He had called me for great things. What was it going to be? I don't know what it was going to be, but I know it was going to be something great. So, as I can relate to this is, after I gave my life to Christ wholeheartedly, I came out of jail. I got baptized and I started walking faithfully with the Lord. But I can honestly say that there was a part of me that didn't want to let go of the world. There was a part of me that, even though like I just didn't want to let go of the world. Why? I don't know. But um, but I know that God has a reason why He allows us to go through what we have to go through. He has to break certain things in our hearts. He has to get us to a certain point that we have to cry out to Him. We have to fully surrender to Him. So you know um, like I can relate to David because just lost my dad last year. It just life changed a lot. Life changed a lot. God opened my eyes a lot. And it's just it's it just life changes a lot. My dad loved the Lord with all his heart. represent his kingdom, and every time he had a chance, he wanted to just serve others, be of a brotherhood, and show that support, and obviously others wanted to do show that support to him as well, and you know how I'm gonna throw a little bit of David's courage here, like how he defeated his giant. Sorry if I'm a little bit, I'm gonna jump around, so bear with me. And um, you know, David defeated his Goliath, right? David defeated his giant Goliath, but because he also knew that, he also knew who stood with him. He knew who had called him. He knew who had anointed him. He knew, you know, um, what was his mission. He knew that you know he's seen God's faithfulness. He's seen God's power in his life, but also because he believed in what God was calling him. He didn't just do it under his power, under his authority. He was standing on the rock. He was standing on God. He was standing on the Lord. So, um, you know, um, courage begins when a man trusts God more than his fears. And I guess I can say that, for David, he believed more in God and what God had called him, and the power that David had seen, that God was showing him, than the fear of the giant. So, as men that we are, I know that we all have our giants, and whether it be, obviously right here in brotherhood we can talk. Also one of the things that I forgot to mention, is a lot of us were exposed to a lot of things, growing up. You know what I mean? So, you know, it distorted our minds. It affected our hearts. It affected our way of living, our way of thinking. Um, and and I think that courage begins when a man trusts more God than his fears. You know, the way that I finally came to realize my giants, fight was by finally submitting, having the courage to finally submit to God's power, to God's calling, finally submitting, not 99% of my heart, not 90%, not 80%, but completely surrendering my heart to God, 100%. That's when I really started seeing, God's life, or God's power in my life. That's when I really started seeing, you know, um, what God was doing through me, and what He was doing in my life. You know, um, real courage. Like I said, it comes from trusting God. Real courage comes from trusting God, and surrendering 100% to God, allowing His power to fight through you, and trust His word and His promises. We all, as men, we all face giants today. Whether it's whatever it can be. You guys know your giants. You guys know what you guys face in life. What gets the best of you, and sometimes we don't allow God's word to lead us, or to overpower what we're going through us, or whatever's bringing us fear. You know, um, but for me, it was for David, it was the giant. For David, it was the giant. That God placed him, to kill this giant. You know what I mean? But for him, it wasn't. There was no fear. For David, there was no fear. Because he knew who stood with him. And how I can finally relate to him is that I finally took that stand. To be courageous and stand. With the Lord, and stand on that power, stand on that anointing that I know God has called me. And that God has placed in my life. Um, for a lot of us, for every man faces giants, right? So men today face giants like fear, anxiety, temptation, financial pressure, family responsibilities, taking care of your kids, you know, issues with the wife, arguments, I mean, and yes, I can say say this, alcohol, drugs, pornography, just being busy, your past, lusting or whatever it may be, maybe just having, I guess you could say, yeah, it could be anything, it could be anything, so, um, I guess I can, I know it's been a good while that I've spoke, up in, in the mic, so um, but that's where I can relate with David, by finally killing my giants in life, was finally fully understanding who I was standing on, and who had called me, and who I was believing, that I finally, surrendered 100% to God's power, to God's promises, and to the calling that He placed in my life, and that's to, to preach the gospel, every time I could, regardless of my work area where I'm called to be, um, I know that God is calling all of us, also to take that step of faith, to take to take our giants, you know what I mean, and stand courageously against them, so we're not defeated by them, you know. Um, just like David, defeated his giant Goliath, because he believed in God, So I don't know what your giants are this, today, but I know that if God helped me, such a person like me, that went through what he went through, and lived the life the way I lived, I know that he can help you guys as well, and you know, um, it's just that's how I can honestly relate to the life of David. Um, him defeating his Goliath, the giant, because he believed, and he fully surrendered to God's power. He fully surrendered to um, to what God had called him for, and and there's just something that I was writing, you know, um, yesterday as I was doing this study as best as I could, you know. There's a couple scriptures, that I wrote down. So it says, "Finally, be strong in the Lord and in His mighty power." Ephesians 6:10. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, and in all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your path straight. Proverbs 3:5-6. Deuteronomy, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. And to end with Ephesians 6:10, finally be strong in the Lord and in His mighty power. And I guess I can finally say that I finally stood courageously, or yeah, courageously stood strong, in the mighty power of God, and that's how I've been able to defeat my giants, which was, I backslid several times, but I always try to do it by myself. I always try to do it with my power. I always try to do it my own way. I always try to do it how I thought it was best, and I wasn't leaning on God's word. I wasn't leaning on God's power. I was trying to do it all myself. That's why I can honestly say that I kept on backsliding and backsliding and backsliding, until finally, it just hit me, and the Holy Spirit spoke to me, and God put it in His Word, and He really crushed my heart in a good way, and I thank God for the fact that he broke my heart in the ways that He needed to, because He needed to break through that hard rock, of a heart that I had, which was pride, arrogance, all of the above, and I finally surrendered to His power. I finally surrendered, to the anointing, accepted it, and because I understood that, that that standing on Him, like His word says, we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. So, with that being said, is yeah, like I finally could say that, like David, he was surrendered, fully to God and to his calling. He was also, um, you know, he's seen, sometimes, even his own family, opposed him. They didn't believe in him. But it came to a point that people started finally seeing God's anointing, God's calling in his life. And one of the things that I like too about standing strong is, we need to make sure that we stand strong with those brothers, that are going to be there to be accountable to us. That we could be accountable to as well. We need each other. We're all, members of the body of Christ. So we all need to work together. You know what I mean? To lift each other up, be there to encourage each other, be able to, call each other out with love, with kindness, with humility, but just being real with each other. And you know, it's just I know I was a little bit all over the place, so forgive me, guys. So just that's how I can relate to um to the journey of David, and him killing his Goliath. So, that's how I came about, to killing my giants. Finally, surrendering to the mighty power of God, and surrendering to the anointing after I came to Christ, knowing that, he had called me for such a time as this, just how he called David for such a time as that, in his time when he was there, that's what he called him for, but, it also required for me to stand firm and courageous on what God was showing me, and the fact that, God was calling me, and yeah, it calls us to believe and not doubt the power of God in our lives. But we have to be willing to surrender these giants to God, because at the end of the day, it's not us that defeats these giants. It's the Lord, that fights these diamonds, these giants, for us. You know what I mean? So it's that fully surrender, fully surrendering to God. That's when God is able to work. When you fully surrender your life, your heart, you fully submit. It ain't gonna be perfect, but God will work out the details along the way. But we have to be, willing to fully submit, fully believe, and fully surrender to His power, fully surrender to that anointing that He has placed in our lives. Whatever calling that may be. I know we all have a calling. We all have been anointed after we came to Christ. We all have a mission that we've been given. We've all been given a command. It's not a choice. It's not a, hey, you can do it if you want. No, I'm giving you a commandment to do this and to do that. So, anyways, but you know, um, that's how I can relate to the life of David killing his Goliath. And that's how I can honestly say that I came to kill my giants. Like he came to kill his giants. By believing in God's power and knowing where he stood at. So yeah. So I appreciate the time. Thank you guys. And I amongst all the back and forth, it's been a while since I've been in a pulpit to talk. So I hope that that the Lord spoke to you guys. I hope that the Lord, whatever it was, even if it was a word, I hope that God gave you what you guys needed to hear of whatever it was. So to God be the glory, honor and praise, and I'm very just very humbled and very just lost for words that just everything that God has done through me, and finally just be able to see it, and stand from a distance and see, you know, how the Lord was always there for me, even when I was not at my best, but finally now that I've stood strong in His power and been courageous, to stand on Him, I'm seeing even more, and it's just yeah. So I encourage you guys to to do the same, to do the same in your own way, for whatever giants you guys have in your lives. So that's how I can relate, to the story of David, and yeah, defeating our giants in life. So God bless you guys. Hope you guys have a blessed day.
What a powerful us, defeating those giants, And as men, we have many giants in our lives. Many of those things that pull us away from serving the Lord. So again, I'm Dr. Vinny. My full-time job, I'm a therapist, a licensed marriage and family therapist. And so whenever I speak, I speak from that lens, the lens of pastoral care, the lens of healing and hope and encouragement. The hope is. So you heard the story of David, and now we get to hear the story of Solomon. Solomon, when he was a young man, he became king. Not quite sure how old he was, but some people think that he might have been a young adult, but he was a young person. And so he knew God, and he knew he had a big task ahead of him. And he asked God for wisdom as he prepared to rule the kingdom. So let's read to hear what happened. So if you have a Bible, or if it's on your phone or on an app, we're in 1 Kings chapter 3. 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 1 to 14. The wisdom of Solomon. Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married his daughter. He brought her to the city of David until he finished building his palace and the temple of the Lord, and the wall around Jerusalem. The people, however, were still sacrificing at the high places because the temple had not yet been built for the name of the Lord. Solomon showed his love for the Lord by walking according to the instructions given him by his father David, except that he offered sacrifices and burnt incense on the high places. The king went to Gibeon to offer sacrifices, for that was the most important high place. And Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream. And God said, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Solomon answered, "You have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son to sit on his throne this very day. Now, Lord, my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David, but I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant here is among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours?" The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. So God said to him, "Since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. And if you walk in obedience to me and keep my decrees and commands as David, your father, did, I will give you long life." Then Solomon awoke, and he realized it had been a dream. He returned to Jerusalem, stood before the ark of the Lord's covenant, and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then he gave a feast for all his court. What a great story. Solomon could have asked for anything. He could have asked for wealth, power, victory over his enemies, but instead he asked for wisdom. So again, Solomon was probably maybe between 18 to 20. You imagine that. what was I doing? What were you doing at 18, right? What were we doing when we were, seniors in high school? Like, would we really say, Lord, give me that wisdom? I think I was lost. I don't even know if I could have even asked that. But he's a young man. He's asking for godly wisdom. Godly wisdom. So in this passage, in the passage after this, two women were arguing about a baby. You might have heard this story. And they each claimed it was their baby, as one of the babies had died. And the other woman had swapped the baby. And he threatens to cut down the baby, and the real mother speaks up to save him while the other disregarded the salvation. But again, think about this. Solomon had that wisdom. He knew what to do in those moments. It was already there. He asked God to give him that wisdom. And so he knew who the real mother was in that moment. And so saying, and I think that's something I'm always asking, Lord, help me, whatever I say, whatever I do, it may be of you. May I glorify you, maybe your words, your thoughts, your ways. Because when I do it, it's a mess. It's a big mess. So again, I think of young men between 18 to 30 when they come to know the Lord at an early age. And I think that's so powerful. They gain so much wisdom when they surrender to God. And it's a difficult task because, again, between that age group, you're trying to figure out, your friends are partying. They're inviting you out to places. They're doing all kinds of stuff. And you're like, should I be going there? Should I not be going there? And I tell you that that wasn't my experience. It really wasn't, because when I truly came to know the Lord, it was much later in my 20s, because of that wrestling, constant wrestling. And I think, Marco, you talked about it, that, we know, it's like, I believe Augustine says, Lord, save me, but not now, right? And so we're like, of course, I would love that. It sounds great. It sounds awesome. But yet, this is also calling my name too. What a wrestling we do, So wisdom today can be the same. Wisdom helps a man make the right decisions in the responsibilities God gives him. So as a young man, I thought I had a lot of wisdom. I studied my bachelor's degree. So it took me 6 years to get my bachelor's degree, because I was in the world. I'm like, finally opened my eyes, and I'm like, oh yeah, I got to finish this college degree. And you go on probation, and then kind of like that last chance, get your grades up, or you're gonna get kicked out. So I'm like, all right, I got to finish this. And then I realized I had so much money I owed. So I'm like, I got to finish this. But again, here I am studying engineering. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm wise, I'm smart. But man, I was struggling. And so in college, I joined the ROTC program in college. So therefore, I was like, oh, I can have a guaranteed job when I'm done. I'm good. I'm all right. And so what's interesting is after 6 years, and I forgot what show that was. They're like, oh yeah, some people call that a master's degree or something, or a doctor's. But after that 6 years, I was like, okay, I can finally get a job, I finally get some money, pay off my debt. And so I'm waiting for my military orders, and they're just taking forever. And I remember being at home in the summertime. My dad he's like, you gonna do anything? You need a job or anything? And I'm like, yeah, Dad, I'm waiting for my orders, the Army. And he goes, well, you got to go do something. You just can't lay on the couch. You got to go do something. So I was like, fine. So I started applying for jobs. And I applied for a job, and I got a job at this starter company. They were dealing with some mechanical engineering stuff. I was like, cool, I got some income. I got to start paying my bills. And then probably by December, I finally get the papers in the mail. It said, you've now been called up. You get, here's your date. Show up, January. So I had to let that job go, and I spent 3 years in the active duty, which was really interesting because, I thought I had wisdom. Look at me and all my, experience and education. But this was my wisdom, my worldly wisdom. It wasn't godly wisdom. Now, I was still a very religious person. I still went to church every Sunday. So it's, I knew who God was, but I don't think I really truly had that relationship with God. So after spending 3 years on active duty, it was very interesting. A year in Korea, we got deployed into Bosnia for a while. But I tell you what, the Lord's hand was on me because I was I thought I had wisdom, but thank God I wasn't put in situations where I needed to have that godly wisdom because I think I would have been in trouble. Um, I was very thankful that the Lord saved me from actual combat, because I was a dumb second lieutenant thinking I knew it all. Man, I was like, thank God I didn't have to go into combat because I think I would have messed something up. Wisdom was very fleeting during this time. Again, thinking I had wisdom. But again, I knew God had his hand on me. And so I remember after leaving active duty, I went into the reserves, and we lived in Texas. And my bright idea was like, I'm going to own a coffee shop. So I opened up this little coffee shop, probably the size of that, foyer there, that as you come in, tiny little coffee shop. And in this coffee shop, I remember one day, this big guy, I mean, he's probably bigger than anybody in here. This guy was huge. Big man. Yeah, even bigger than you, Leo. I know. It's hard to believe that, right? Even bigger than Leo, man. Leo's huge. Well, and it's interesting because this guy he tells me that he was doing he was part of a Christian powerlifting team. And so he's like, yeah, we would break bats on our legs, and we'd put them in the name of Jesus, and we'd like crack bats and stuff. I mean, this guy was big. He barely fit in the frame of the door. But I remember he'd come into this little coffee shop, and he would just buy a cup of coffee. That's it, And back then, coffee was $1. Put $1 on the counter. And he'd sit in the corner, like, right there. And he'd open his Bible, and he would write scriptures on napkins. Good guy, too. And he'd come up, and he'd share the word with me, and he'd be like, take these, man. Look them up. He goes, look them up. So I was like, I was the business person. Oh, thank you. Have a great day, Thank you. And so he would do this every other day. He'd just show up, and he'd write scriptures on napkins, and he'd give them to me, and he'd share the word. And I remember the day, and so I was probably maybe 26, 27. I remember the day when he says, Vinny, he goes, when you die, how do you know you're going to heaven? And I was like, I'm a very religious person, He goes, but, he says, don't tell me because you're a good person, you go to church, or you love your family. And I was like, because that was my answer. That was my answer. I thought I was a good person. I go to church every Sunday. I love my family. I just got married to my wife. And so I was kind of just stunned, like, oh, that was my answer. So I go home, to my new bride. And so I ask her this same question, and with that same caveat. When you die, how do you know you're going to heaven? And that same caveat. But don't tell me because you're a good person, you go to church and love your family. And so she was kind of like stunned. We were, again, we went to church on Sundays. So then I said, do we own a Bible? And she goes, I think I got one somewhere back there somewhere for a gift, those great big ones that they give you. And so I grabbed this stack of napkins that he had been leaving me, and I started digging into the Word. And I started digging into the Word, and the Lord started speaking. And the Lord started opening my mind and my heart, and the Spirit started moving. Man, he started lighting a fire in me. All of a sudden, the coffee shop that I had became this place of ministry. I was putting scripture verses on the walls. I was like talking to people about Jesus. And the Lord had lit this fire in me, man. I was a little harsh too. I was a little tough. I mean, I was like, you gotta know Jesus, you know. I was like, man, the fire was there, you know. And I remember too, some people would walk away and would like not come back, you know, and others like you could tell they needed to hear the Lord, you know, they needed to hear about Jesus, and it was powerful. It was powerful. And so it's interesting because this big guy disappeared for a while, and so I remember. So we had our first son, and my wife had she was in the tech industry, so she started moving into her career. She was making a lot more than I was, so I was like, okay, what are we gonna do with our son? You know, so the Lord spoke to me, and the Lord said I was gonna watch him. I was like the last person. I had no patience. I had, you know, my nurturing abilities, I'm not sure were really quite there, you know, so, but it was so loud and clear. The Lord said, you're gonna watch him. I was like, oh, so, all right, I'm gonna see if I could sell this business like that within a week. Somebody literally walked in, bought everything in the place, and I was like, oh wow, this is happening, you know? And so this is interesting because culturally, men, especially Latino men, don't stay home and take care of kids, you know? And so here I am, you know, at home with this little baby, tiny baby, you know, feeding, changing, you know, cleaning house and stuff. And I remember mopping one day and I was like, Lord, I was like, I want to serve you, Lord. Tell me, how can I serve you? And again, loud and clear, the Lord said, you're doing it. This is it. And I was like, whoa. And there was a mop in my hand. He said, you're doing it. And it was so, so important because our kids were little and they just needed someone to be there. And so it's really interesting because as I was closing that shop, I remember that big guy came in one day and he came back to visit. And he said, he shared with me, he said, he goes, you don't understand. He goes, when I was coming to your shop, he goes, that was probably the lowest point in my whole life. And he goes, but the Lord kept telling me to speak to you. And I was like, wow, you know, real powerful. And I think he was struggling a lot with his marriage and his family. But again, his name was Michael. Our son's name is Christian Michael. And it's powerful. And we shared that story with him for many years, how, where he got his name from. You know, because we kept thinking, what's a good Christian name for our son, right? And we're like, oh, you know, I wanted to use like Moses, you know, Abraham. My wife's like, no, you know, Isaac, Jacob, you know. She's like, no. I was like, right? Jesus. And so I was like, how about Christian? She was like, yeah, that's a good name. It's a good Christian name, right? Christian. Yeah. But again, really, really awesome. And I was blessed. So even as, you know, as we had our daughter, I was very blessed to be able to, again, same thing. I was in that role. And then it'd be interesting. In between, you know, kids, I would go and do ministry. I would do a lot of volunteering. I'd work, you know, we would do youth groups, Bible studies. I mean, the Lord was like pushing, like, you know, he wanted to serve. All right, Lord, I'm serving. Here I am. And so we were doing a lot of things. My wife and I started working with couples to prepare them for marriage. You know, and we were young. We were still in our marriage, really young in our marriage. But again, the Lord was doing his thing. And it's very interesting because every time I'd go into ministry and I'm like, okay, I did some time here, I'm good. You know, I'm step out. The Lord's like, no, I'm not done with you yet. You know, but Lord, we got another baby. Because that's nice. He goes, but I'm not done with you yet. You know. And so every time I tell you, the Lord he says, nope, not done. You're not done. You can't retire. You know, you're not done. And even today, right? Even being here, you know, I'm like, I just want to be a participant. Lord, I just want to go pray. I just want to hear. And he's like, you're not done yet. You know, you're not done. So wisdom comes from looking back and noticing how God is moving. It comes from learning from our mistakes, our stubbornness, our foolishness. Truly, God's wisdom comes from knowing that even when I wandered, God was showing me, teaching me, and preparing me for the next step. And it's always interesting because I always heard the Lord say, prepare, prepare, prepare. So I'd go back to school and I'd get a master's in, pastoral ministry. Then I'd get a master's in counseling. And I'm like, man, I'm getting, there's a lot of debt here, But the Lord kept saying, prepare, prepare, prepare. And even at, go back, I'm like, I think I'm done with it. I've got enough, certificates and stuff. And even just doing this doctorate program, I'm like, oh, man, school again. And the Lord's like, no, he goes, prepare, prepare. And I've always heard that. The Lord says, prepare. He I've got something for you to do. It's not for me either. He says, I got something for you to do. And I remember, I heard somebody say this too. And I hope that the day that it is my time, that the Lord will look and he says, where's Vinny at? He goes, oh, no, he's doing ministry. He's still working, right? And I hope that's where I'm at, that I'm still doing that. They have to go looking for me. Where is he? Where is he? He's still doing that. So I've been married for 29 years. We just celebrated our anniversary May 10th. Thank you. What's really interesting is, many times people are doing ministry or doing something and they're like, oh, but I'm not the perfect person. I don't have my stuff straight. I don't have it perfect, And, 29 years, man, you go through a lot of up and downs. You go through a lot of, figuring it out. What is this? What's going on? You got to let some tension. And so I don't have to have it perfect, and I know that. I just need to keep learning. All right, Lord, show me what is this. All right, Lord, show me what I need to change. All right, Lord, show me what I need to do. And again, that's the wisdom. That's his wisdom. So again, even though it's not perfect, I'm not perfect, the Lord is still doing his thing. And I know sometimes we think, oh, not me, Lord, not me. I don't have that education or that. I'm not, but the Lord's like, nope, you need to go. You need to do. Keep doing it. So recently there's been one really big message that's been speaking to me and I've been sharing with other men. My practice is really focused on men, Christian men. So I get a really good range, from 19-year-olds to like 60-year-olds that I work with. And it's really interesting because the Lord had been putting this message in my heart and it made total sense. It made sense psychologically, theologically, it just made sense. And I share this with you today because this statement can be slightly countercultural. And many times men are asked to be providers and protectors, right? But I think sometimes we get it, we miss something there. And what the Lord had put on my heart, he said, men are providers and protectors of the emotional stability of their home. So let me say it again. Men are providers and protectors of the emotional stability of their home. So as men, we set a tone in our house. We do. If we get mad, guess what happens? We create some chaos. If we're passive, guess what? Chaos still ensues. If we have a family, if we have a spouse, a child who may be dysregulated, if we meet them up here, guess what happens? Nothing happens, right? Just chaos. If all of a sudden we're like, oh, just, let your, mother take care of that. Again, we're being too passive. We set the emotional, we set this kind of equilibrium. We're here. We set it here. And so, when our tone is firm, our tone is loving, our tone is caring, we are inviting others to come and meet us there. Even if they're up here, we're like, no, I'm not going to meet you there. I'm right here. We're setting this emotional stability in our home. So we invite people to come and meet us here. We invite people to come up, meet us here, because we set the tone. We are providers and protectors of emotional stability in our home. And again, this is very interesting because when we look at how we can get anxious or angry or dismissive, we're like, I'm not setting the tone. Set the tone, the equilibrium. You know, psychologically, when I look at how anxiety and depression works, we could be up here and we could meet people up here and we could be so, worried about every little thing, about things are all a mess and things are not perfect. But again, we're like right here. And we set a firmness with loving, caring, kindness. And I tell you what, it makes a difference. It really does. And again, I work with men who, we might have met our opposite. And if we're chill and that person is not, it's easy to get pulled up here, or it's easy to get blamed, like you need to come up here with me. And so as men, if we set the tone and say, I'm right here, we set this equilibrium, and I'm going to be patient, I'm going to be loving, I'm going to be firm, but I'm going to lean in. Then we allow that space for somebody to say, okay, I'm right here with you. And that's so powerful, it really is. Really is. I remember one of the first Christian books I ever read was on Coach Dungy. I don't know if you guys know who Coach Dungy is. He's an NFL head coach. Indianapolis Colts, Super Bowl. And I remember reading his book, and it's called Quiet Strength, one of his books. And I remember he told his players, he said, I will never raise my voice. You just need to listen. And it's so true, this quiet strength. Men today, we're called to lead our homes or marriages or workplaces, schools, communities. But again, leadership without wisdom leads to damage and leads to a lot of ego. It creates something that's not from God. Wisdom comes from seeking God. And when we seek him, he helps us come right in here in that equilibrium. He helps us to set the tone. When we're setting the tone, even though there's chaos, it has to come back to that equilibrium. So Solomon understood something so important. You can have a position with or without godly wisdom, but he knew the latter. He knew he wanted to lead his kingdom with godly wisdom. As men, we carry heavy regrets when we do not seek God's wisdom. And like many men, especially around people that hover around my age, we can say that, man, I wish I knew that. I wish I knew God earlier. I wish I knew him when I was younger. We toil, we struggle because we keep trying to lead from our own wisdom and not from his wisdom. So again, I'm very blessed as a Christian therapist working with young men. It's really cool to see what God does in their life. And I love it when they're so open to like they're just hungry. There's this hunger. I was like, so cool, man. I said, I wish I could have that. I wanted that, So I invite you to continue to align yourself with God. And this is very interesting because our alignment can be off. But every time we come back, we know I believe it's called the plumb, right? It's like a tool. And it's heavy, it's a weight, and it just sits there. And we're always trying to, when we misalign, we come right back in alignment. We come back in alignment, right? It's like the level, right? The level, the bubble. And that's what we always have to keep doing. We come back in alignment. All right, Lord, I could feel it. I'm off. This whole week, the enemy kept poking at me and prodding me, man, because he knew something good was going to happen today. And I was getting distracted, and I was getting in my head, and I was like, man, I got to stay focused on the Lord and his wisdom, not mine. So again, I'm very envious when younger people get to know the Lord because I think it's so exciting. It's so cool. So my goal today is to be obedient to the wisdom God has blessed me with. So I think of Solomon. As he got older, there was something Solomon did. He drifted. He kind of started drifting. He gave in to a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little more of this, a little more of that. He kept drifting. His alignment was off. His alignment started going off. And so I know that happens to us all the time, especially sometimes we just get tired. Oh man, you know, and we give in. Yeah, yeah. Especially like we have 3 kids, and on the third kid, the oldest will always say, "Man, you let the third one get away with a lot," because you're just tired, man. I remember the curfew was what 10, then it got to 12, you know, and then sometimes I'm like, "What? Okay, you're good," you know. Yeah, not that thing, right? Yeah. So what we'll be challenged, we'll be tested, we'll be tempted. Again, Solomon gave in little by little. His legacy was of wisdom, but also of drifting. He kind of drifted here and there. He gave in a little bit. So we should learn from him. And when it comes to wisdom, we learn from Solomon. The enemy will test and tempt, but in the end, we get that alignment back. Let's align with God. Let's get back in alignment. So align yourself. When you stumble, fall, or just a little off course, realign yourself. So, in conclusion, I invite you to seek, align, obey, and share. Seek, ask God for His wisdom. Seek to have a discerning heart. Align, maintain the alignment so that we can keep hearing Him even when others try to distract us. Obey, stay obedient to the promise. Don't stray from the wisdom that God has given you, and share it. Share it with others. Share it with others. Especially if you're hovering around my age, it's our job now to mentor and to share and to bring others to know the Lord. I was again in my thoughts the other day, and I just went for a good run, and I pushed myself further. I'm like, I just got to go further. I go farther, and it was tough. This 55-year-old body, man, it was tough. It was going up a hill, and I was thinking, you know what? That was good. 2-3 miles was good. I was like, but what would great look like? What would great feel like? That's good, but what would great look and feel like? And so it really challenged me, and I really offer this to you guys too. Sometimes we're like, I'm good. Me and God are good, but what would great look like? What would great look like? So we're going to take a little break and then come right back in because we're going to raffle off that shirt, the mug, and a Bible. So if you haven't done a raffle ticket, make sure you put in that little blue bag. Don't go away because Ryan's going to do his talk. So our break isn't that long. It's really quick. And then Ryan's going to do his talk, and then we'll just kind of have a nice discussion afterwards. Sound like a plan? Cool. Thank you, guys.
was born to lift your name above all names. You hear the melody of all creation. But there's a song of praise that only I can bring. And who else is worthy? Who else is worthy? There is no one, only you, Jesus. Who else is worthy? Who else is worthy? There is no one, only you, Jesus. You are the infinite God of the ages. And yet you chose to make my heart your dwelling place. You healed my brokenness and showed me your glory. So I have songs of thanks not even angels sing. And who else is worthy? Who else is worthy? There is no one, only you, Jesus. Who else is worthy? Who else is worthy? There is no one, only you, Jesus. And who else is worthy? Who else is worthy? There is no one, only you, Jesus. Who else is worthy? Who else is worthy? There is no one, only you, Jesus. Lamb of God, anointed one, who was and is to come, seated on the throne above. Holy, holy, righteous one, who shed his blood. You prove to us the Father's love. Jesus Christ, be lifted up. Holy, holy, Lamb of God, anointed one, who was and is to come, seated on the throne above. Holy, holy, righteous one, who shed his blood. You prove to us the Father's love. Jesus Christ, be lifted up. Holy, holy, you are the Lamb of God, who was and is to come, seated on the throne above. Holy, holy, righteous one, who shed his blood. You prove to us the Father's love. Jesus Christ, be lifted up. Who else is worthy? Who else is worthy? There is no one, only you, Jesus. Who else is worthy? Who else is
Come on in. Let's do the raffle. All right, so we have this really cool mug. And also, you saw the QR code at the table. You can also purchase one online if you want. They come in different colors. We have this really cool shirt. It says, "Men stand strong, courage, wisdom, integrity," and the design in the back. Yeah. So I found this cool website where I can design stuff, and so I was able to design these. And this is an extra large because I knew I wasn't going to wear it unless unless it's a sleep shirt for me. Walking around, huh? I know, huh? Showing pierna, huh? I know, huh? I don't want to get my wife all excited or anything, you know. And then the third one is this amazing NIV Bible. So I had bought this because it has bigger text, and then I realized I just needed new glasses. So then I'm like, cool, I can read my other Bible and I can give this one away. It's when you start going like this, you're like, okay, maybe I need to go to the eye doctor. Either have longer arms. All right, so I need somebody to come pick out one from here. A volunteer to pick out one. Who's it? Oh, you need guy. Santiago! Let me hold that one. You get your choice, man. Cup, shirt, or Bible. Yeah. Here you go. Woo. All right, all right. Somebody else. Pick one. And with gum, huh? Anthony, yeah. Woo. Bible or extra large shirt? Yeah. Sweet. All right, you get to pick the next one now. Last one. Arturo. Woo-hoo-hoo. It's a nice workout shirt, huh? Thank you, brother. And Arturo, big hand for Arturo, who provided our breakfast this morning. Woo! Very cool. All right, let me get my notes to introduce our next speaker. I asked him to give me a bio, and Ryan was like, gave me this like 3-page document. And when I was two, just kidding. All right, so before we gather into our small group discussion, we have one more very important talk. Ryan will be presenting on the topic of integrity as seen in the book of Daniel. So let me share a little bit about Ryan. Ryan Thurlow is a family man married to his beautiful wife, Catherine, and has 2 children, Victoria and Ryancito Thurlow. And Ryan became a Christian at age 8 when attending South Coast Community Church, now Mariners Church in Irvine. And at age 9, Ryan officially welcomed Jesus into his heart at a Billy Graham crusade at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena in 1987. Woo! Yep. I know. Billy Graham? Who's Billy Graham? I know his son, but and so Ryan is in his 23rd year as a special education teacher at Mission Viejo High School and has been in the varsity boys volleyball coach for the past 12 years. He played volleyball at USC for 4 years and was a starter on the #1 ranked Trojans in the year 2000. He recently retired from coaching with now more time to give to his family and students. Ryan has been at Fado for 10 years and enjoys his fellowship and walk with the church members. Let's welcome Ryan.
Thank you, sir. So when Dr. Vinny asked me to speak, I was pretty fired up, And then he told me, I looked at the papers that he gave me. We got courage, we got wisdom, integrity. Come on, man, you're punishing me. That's a tough one, right? That's the tough one. I could come up here and talk about courage, man. I got too much courage, right? I got a lot of courage. I got a lot of what I call wisdom, right? Wisdom that I think that I possess, right? But integrity, come on. That's the daily action that as myself is a daily retrieve, right? It's contrary action of what my brain likes to go to, which is not always the greatest spot. I get down on my knees every morning and say the serenity prayer that encompasses both of those words. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to accept the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I don't see integrity in there. So I get on my knees. I am there's parts of the 12-step program that I use every day. That's one of the 12-step programs, is the serenity prayer, to get down on my knees, to say the Lord prayer, to try to have contrary action, to try to be of service. My past growing up was very privileged, not economically, but as the last of 5 children, I was like the baby, right? Someone just got done talking about how the baby gets away with everything. So I was the baby, All my siblings were in college, and I was like in 6th grade. Then they graduated, and I was in 7th grade. And so my mom and dad were like, okay, Little Caesars tonight, McDonald's tomorrow night. Like, whatever I wanted to do in a good way, I got to do. These were the times where you could ride your Mongoose scooter to Lake Mission Viejo, to Ruby's. When they had a Ruby's diner at the Lake Mission Viejo growing up, I'd ride my scooter as an 8-year-old. I'd come back when the lights came on. I'd be playing basketball every single day at Barcelona Hills Elementary School, playing golf down there. Then I got into volleyball and basketball, and I was a fine basketball player, an even better volleyball player, so I got a scholarship to USC. And, I was all over the news in Orange County my senior year and junior year. I was stricken with spinal meningitis, which half of the people that get that die. There's limbs that are amputated, and spinal meningitis is the serious infection of the meninges that develop within the spinal cord. So I was out for 48 hours my junior year and in Mission Hospital. And at that time, my mom said, I'm just not losing another kid. She had already lost her first daughter, Stacy. So she knew that at some point I was going to be awake, but I was out for 48 hours. And I woke up, and within 2 weeks, I was back on the volleyball court by the grace of God. When I was playing at that time, because I was on the number 1 ranked team in Orange County at Capistrano Valley, and people actually went to high school games back then, it's all club now or whatever they're doing. They're gaming or they're on their phone. They don't have to go anywhere. They got it on their phone in their dark room. So people used to go to games, and because I had just coming out of the hospital, I was getting a lot of coverage, a lot of press. LA Times, Orange County Register. I started to get this huge ego, right? Not only was I a decent player, dating a lot of girls in high school, and getting now all this press, I started to get an ego on top of being the last spoiled child, right? And I went to USC, and I thought that, my number 1 goal there was to just be a starter on the team as a freshman. That's all I wanted to do, was play volleyball. I wanted to be a starter. I looked at somebody and I said, I'm taking your job respectfully. A lot a lot like Coach Carroll would do, right? You beat yourself and your opponents in practice so that when you get to the game, you're usually playing against the better players at practice than you do against your opponents. And so I got up there, and I was able to start, and I was able to contribute, and I was able to contribute on the number 1 ranked team in the country my junior year. And I started to dabble into some extracurricular activities that I didn't really have an opportunity to in high school. In high school, I was sheltered and privileged, meaning I just always had a ball in my hand. And I was at the tennis court, I was at basketball court, volleyball court, so I never had a drink in my hand. I never had a drug in my hand because I was always playing sports. But when you got to SC, we were having after parties after the games. The coaches were at the after parties. This is a weird time, man. Like, the 90s were real. Like, fast forward right now, try to get a USC coach at your after party? No. So we started to get into some things that we shouldn't have gotten into, and I got into this toxic relationship with my ex of 10 years. I was with a previous gal for a long time, and she had brain cancer. Her mom was murdered, and it's a story, man. It's a story. And through all that, we started to dabbling into medications that, kind of numbed us and made us not have emotions, and started to get into maybe the nightlife scene down in Hollywood. And, these were my early 20s. And then I hit a bottom, and I realized and woke up that you're not invincible. That I had taken it so far, pushing it, thinking that it's always going to be okay, that everything's always going to work out favorous. Well, it didn't work out favorous, and I hit a real deep, dark bottom at the age of 30. I broke up from the girl that I was with. I lost my job teaching. I was up. It's funny, I lived up in Palmdale, Lancaster with her. We were able to buy a house. It was a place where we could buy a house. And it's funny, the residents of the Antelope Valley, they say, you're leaving Orange County, and I came to San Juan Hills, but bro, somehow this valley sucks you back up. I ended up back up there. After 1 year of San Juan Hills, I didn't do a fine job teaching. I got let go. I went back up to Vasquez Rocks, right? Whereas, like, on the way to Palmdale, up the 14th. I was hurt, man. I had lost my girl. I had lost my job. I had to get my own house in order. And that's when I started to work a 12-step program. And I was able to make a really good 10, 11 years of that. I'm not in the program. I do practice principles of it. But that program was really, really influential for me to get me right, okay? It was all about a daily surrender to yourself. It was all about contrary action, about helping people. And I started to gain this new integrity that I had never had before. I was able to show my face, look at myself in the mirror, and be like, you know what? You're walking a better walk. Wasn't perfect, but it was a better walk. Daniel 6:4 reads, at this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy, and they could find no corruption nor negligence. Okay? My heart is full of corruption. Like, that's just, unfortunately, who I am. Like, I see my son, and I wish that I had, and my wife, I kind of wish that I had their hearts at times, right? Like, I see my son, and he is just full of integrity. Like, he is just like this rule follower. He's just always just on it. He doesn't want to hurt anybody. For me, it's a struggle. It's a struggle daily to get outside of self and to be able to be of service the way that I want to. We talked about how much we have on our plate as men, right? My day starts at 6:30. I live in a Colombian household, right? That's not always an amazing thing in sense that there's some screaming, there's some chaos, there's some loudness. I wouldn't change it for the world. I'm the most blessed man in the world to have my wife and my kids. But living in a Colombian household, it gets a little wild. There's avocados thrown at you. There's chanclas all the time. It's our own fault. Why can't we just wake them up at 6:20 instead of 6:50? We're always running behind. So at 6:30, I'm the one who's cooking breakfast. We're getting the water ready. We're packing the backpack. I'm driving them to school. I'm going to serve special educators or special ed kids at my job. Then I'm going to IEP meetings in the afternoon. Then I go to volleyball practice. It gets to be about 5 or 6. Got to go home. Got to be a daddy. Go play with the kids, hour and a half, 2 hours. Then, right when you want to sleep, what comes next? You got to be a husband, or at least I got to try. Some days are better than others. But by 8:30, poor Katsy, she's like, yep, this old man's sleeping again. By that time, I just want to, but to have integrity, to just listen to her, to be present, I could be in the room, but I'm not present, right, is something that is a work in progress, right? That shut up to my own self and just be present and listen. And that is a wonderful blessing to be able to have that beautiful wife and the kids and the job. And so I got to tell myself every night to just be present, be still, be calm, listen, and like you had said, set the emotional regulation in the house, right? Just the man, they're looking. The kids are looking. My students are looking. They're looking at this passage. If they were to read this passage, this verse, and see that there is no corruption in your teacher, that's a blessing. I would love to go to school and do go to school and set the tone for my students, with my student athletes. In 12 years, I've missed one game, the birth of my child. I've missed 3 practices. That, I feel, is part of it, integrity. A sign up, show up mentality. When you sign up for something, show up. It's such a dying art of just showing up anywhere anymore. And I'm a victim of it too. Just showing up anymore, being present, because we always have these excuses why we can't go. We're tired, we don't feel like it. But 95% of the time when we show up, we're so fortunate, and we love that we showed up. So we're all sinners. We all fall short. And when I heard about talking about integrity, I'm like, I better get my own house in order, right? I have 3 weeks to clean it up. And, just like the 12-step program for today, right? Just for today, right? That's a book as well. Just for today, I'm going to make a better choice when I get home. I'm going to be present with my wife. I'm going to be present with my kids. I'm going to play with my kids in the pool. I may actually go buy a gift for a birthday boy, instead of just always relying on the wife, right? Just for today. And, if I can do that for today, there's a better chance tomorrow if I did it today. There's a lot of things that I've kind of wrote here that talk about integrity. One of the books that I teach my students is called Into the Wild by John Krakauer. It's about a story of Chris McCandless, who in the 90s, he went out as like an inspired transcendentalist of the readings of Emerson, Thoreau, and he went out to find his own life. He was kind of similar story to me, kind of had a lot growing up, went to a college, and then just kind of found the world to be this dark, dirty place, and he went to go live off the land in Alaska. And he ended up dying in Alaska after 112 days. You can watch the Netflix. It's called Into the Wild, the book and the movie. It's a good story, but why am I bringing this up? Because he made a lot of profound statements that I think talk about integrity and talk about practical changes that we can do as men. One of the things that he was quoted saying was, so many of us live within unhappy circumstances, but don't take the action to get out of them. Why am I always beating myself up, right? I'm my own worst enemy. I make choices that beat myself up. I make choices to not move forward at times, to follow that advice of getting outside of unhappy circumstances. For 10 years, I've said, I'm going to play golf more, I'm going to play tennis more, I'm going to play basketball more. None of that is materialized. We live within unhappy circumstances, but don't make the changes to get out of them. But at the same time, we shouldn't beat ourselves up. I'm really good at that. I like to beat myself up because I expect greatness. And if I fall short of greatness, then I'm hard on myself. And so maybe it doesn't have to be playing tennis 5 days a week, but it is helping the wife with the dishes without her asking. It is listening to her, hugging her, giving her a massage, talking to her, talking to my kids, and to give ourselves credit for that. That's integrity, in my opinion, is to just be present anymore in a day and age where we're so distracted. One of my favorite movies is Devil's Advocate. Al Pacino plays the devil. Keanu Reeves is his son. And it's a very, very brilliant movie. Very disturbing, but really, really well written. And Al Pacino's walking with his son, Keanu Reeves, and he is the devil. Keanu Reeves doesn't know that he is the devil, but he says, "Who can argue that the devil has not won completely over the 21st century?" Right? We're living in a dark world, dark times. We need to be the light. Just opening a door, just looking at a student, doesn't have to be all of them, one of them makes a difference, and just saying, how's your day going? Listening. Picking up the volleyballs, not asking everybody to do it, setting up the nets, not asking everybody to do it. Little things that lead by example and being integrity are full of integrity. Signing up, showing up, being the first one there, the last to leave. That's integrity. You know, I have fear, man. I'm going to be 50 in a few years, and I'm fearful. I mean, it's like when do we make this life as brilliant as it can be, right? Why is it so hard to get outside of self? Why is it so hard to make choices that could lead to an amazing life, right? Like you said, why not be great? We're good. Maybe because we're good, or I'm good, excuse me, maybe because things are good, I get in a place of complacency and need to get into a better place of greatness. The greatest thing that God gave us is today, right? There is today. There is tomorrow. There is that opportunity to make that change. To say, today, I'm not going to have a drink. Today, I'm not going to, have a drug. Today, I'm not going to look at imagery. Today, I live in Medellin, Colombia, for 3 months of the year. There's a lot of temptation. Today, I'm going to be on the straight and narrow. Today, I'm going to focus my eyes on you. and to get outside of self and the contrary action that's needed. I've learned, took a long time, that nothing is given in life, everything is earned. And that because we live where we live, we should capitalize on capitalism. You know, that's one of the things I teach my students is we have the opportunity to capitalize on capitalism, but to do it the right way. Integrity is closing up the gym at 9:30 with a cash box, give him 50, there's $400 in it. Nobody would ever know if oh yeah, okay. You know, things like that run through my head, unfortunately. But integrity is 12, 13 years of never taking a dollar. You know, 12, 13 years of never ordering stuff, putting them on eBay, ordering materials from within the program or selling it to a third market. To have some level of integrity, to have some level of justice is something I give myself credit for there. You know, how are we going to be remembered? How are we going to be looked at with our character? There's a lot of things that my dad instilled in me that are amazing. He loves all populations. Maybe that's why I married a Latino. He always loved the Latino population. He was a man of integrity. He loved his kids. He worked hard for his family. I want to be remembered like my dad. He is my mentor. Are there things that he does that I don't want to put in my practical life? Of course. Nobody wants to be 2-for-1 Toby your whole life, penny pinching Peter. You know, like those commercials. You don't have to end up like your father. But in this way, I want to end up like my father because he was a man of integrity, a man of God, and a man who made an impactful difference in my life. So because of all the things that we have, I have, and have talked about, for today, I'm going to be a man of integrity. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ryan. So really quick, and we're only going to probably maybe spend 15 minutes. If you guys can help me circle these chairs, I think we're just a good sized group, 15 minutes, just chat and kind of catch up. What did you guys hear today? You know, what it spoke to you, if you want to share a little bit. So yeah, if we can pull these apart and just kind of make a slight circle. Nice. Thank you, guys. Cool. Come on in, guys.